Can we put our hands together and welcome Paul to the floor?
In early 2000, I was a technical director of a company in Nottingham. It was all work and no play. I was working 12, 13, 14-hour days. So I decided I was going to do something about it. I took a redundancy package, and then I did what's called a thought experiment. I want to ask you all, who here has bought a lottery ticket? Put your hand up. Yeah? Very good. Quite a lot of you. Who here has never bought a lottery ticket? Great. Who here has won more than £1 million on the lottery? There we go. Is that true? Okay. I've still got my hand up. So how was that possible if I never bought a ticket? What I did, I sat down and I said, I'm going to win the lottery tomorrow. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to buy the car, buy the boat, buy the plane, whatever I'm going to do. Then how am I going to live my life the day after? And I'd like every one of you to think about that. If you won 20, 30 million pounds on the lottery, how would you spend your time? And it took me probably a few weeks to actually realize what I really meant by the question, and then a few more weeks to understand the answer. And I decided I wanted to do research, I wanted to travel, and I wanted to put something back into society. I formed a consortium of 5 organizations, 4 universities and one charity, and we were fortunate to win quite a lot of money from the government to do the research in this area, and that's where the score stove came from. University of Nottingham led it, and I mentioned the other universities before. The numbers have changed now, but there's 3 billion people that cook on an open fire. There's now 4 million per year that die prematurely because of smoke inhalation. It's changed. A few years ago, it was thought it was only 2 million, but the latest figures are now 4 million. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. And I know some of the other presenters today have mentioned this. It's very easy for us in the north to think we know the answers and how we can help the south, and I don't believe that. So I went to live in Nepal. We spent a whole day on a bus over rickety roads, which you see there, to a town. And for those of you with a weak disposition, you may want to look away now, because that's me topless. It then took us a full day to walk up the hill to a village. The village had got no electricity, no roads, no sanitation. And this little girl came to the top of the village, and she saw us walking up, and she ran away. And I thought, I don't normally have that impact on people, but anyway, she ran away from us. And then what she was doing is tell the villagers that we would arrive. I went with a charity who'd put in a school and a health center. And they brought a little welcoming party. You can see part of the welcoming party there. These people live on less than £1 per day, less than £1 a day. However, 2,000 people from the village came out to visit us. Virtually the whole of the village came out. Remember, these people have got no money. But as we walked in, they welcomed every one of us. They put garlands round our neck. They gave us chapatis, which we could eat. Yogurt, of course, there's no plates, no knives and forks, so that went in the hand. We ate that. And they make a little alcohol, so they gave us that as well, and we drank that. Even the very poor people in the village wanted to give us something. They were all smiling. If I walk around London, I see very few people smiling in the street, but they were all smiling. And it changed my mind. These people didn't have wealth, but to my mind, they had richness. And it really hit me in the heart. They put on a special presentation for us. They did dances, they did music, a whole host of things, which I'll tell you about later on if you want, but I don't have time to do it now. And those 3 billion people, a lot of them are in Africa. I've mentioned Nepal already. Believe it or not, cooking is nearly 1 million years old. The Homo species have been cooking for nearly 1 million years. So it's very well ingrained in society. Hillary Clinton in 2010 set up the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves, which we're a part of, to try and put 100 million clean cooking stoves in by 2020. It's a great opportunity. They're trying to make a big difference. Now, unfortunately, it's been known for a long time that cooking with smoke inhalation is a problem. Well over 50, maybe even 60 years. But the uptake outside China is less than 8%. If you look at mobile phones, when I went to Nepal in 2007, there wasn't any phones. In fact, I tell a lie, there was one. The chief had one, a long-range telephone. Yet now, well over 50% of the poor people have got a mobile phone. There's something about mobile phones that's different to cooking stoves. There's a motivation there. So one of the major things we did on the project was to look at the social interactions. What makes the mobile phone sexy where the cooking stove isn't, and can we change the things round? One of the interesting things on the social side is people have been putting clean cook stoves in. They put some clean cook stoves in Nepal, and they found that they weren't being used. So people went back and said, why aren't you using the stove? And they said, well, we prefer the old-fashioned way. They then did what I did. They lived with the village. I lived with villagers for 2 weeks on my own, with the team. And you get to know them, you get interaction. And they found that the villagers made the illicit alcohol. What you're seeing there is a still. And the cooking stoves that they were given, they had a chimney to take the smoke out, which makes sense. Unfortunately, the still wouldn't fit on the stove because the chimney was in the way. And that's the reason that they didn't use the stoves. They didn't tell anybody that because it was illegal. So the solution's fairly obvious. You move the chimney, and the stoves were then accepted. The other thing in Africa as well is people believe if you get rid of the smoke, the termites come and eat your houses down. So there's a natural barrier there. Another time, I think this was Ethiopia, a whole village was given clean cook stoves. 6 months later, there was a follow-up done. The village was empty. There was nobody in the village. People went back into the bush to try and find the villagers and said, what's the problem? The villagers said, oh, the stoves brought the demons. The stoves brought the demons. Does anybody perhaps understand why that was said? Well, the reason is that the smoke keeps the insects away, and the insects bring disease with them. So the villagers saw clean cook stoves, they were getting ill, and the only way it could be described was they brought the demons. So this was another inhibitor in order to, that you had to understand to get through. The solution's quite easy. It's a technical solution. You put a baffle on the chimney, and twice a week you have to ask the villagers to turn the baffle. It smokes the house, then they go back into the house, and then it keeps the insects away. So, in conclusion, if you do make changes, and in our case, it was getting rid of smoke, you have to understand the consequences of doing that. Because quite often, there are a lot of complex, both technical and social technical interactions that you need to understand. Okay, motivators. Yeah, mobile phone charging is quite important. You see people all over the place now with a push bike, a battery on the back, down into the town, charge the battery, up the hill, charge the local people's mobile phones. It's a big industry now because this mobile phone is important. What tends to happen is the clever people in the village go into the towns, they get educated, they earn money, so they send the mobile phone back to mum and dad, but of course mum and dad can't use the phone because there's no electricity. So that is quite a big motivator. If you could put electricity in the village as well as smoke-free stoves, you get rid of the smoke from the cooking, but you also get rid of smoke from the lamps because they use little kerosene lamps for lighting. And that's smoky as well. So we thought, okay, part of the business case was to say they buy kerosene for the lamps, and people will spend £2 or £3 a month on kerosene for lamps typically. In Kenya, I think India's slightly well subsidized, so it's slightly less. So we said, well, that's a good business case. So we put electricity, clean cooking stoves, into 24 villages in Kenya. We went back a few months later and said, how's the business case going? The consumption of kerosene only dropped by 25%. They were still using it. So we tried to investigate to say, why is it only dropped 25%? You shouldn't be using kerosene. Of course, what we didn't realize, we put in lights like we have here. Typical Western light switches on the wall. They don't have indoor toilets, do they? So at night, they have to go out to the toilet, they have to go out to tend the animals, and that's when they were using the kerosene. So we made a very small change. We put in torches as well, rechargeable torches, and the kerosene use then dropped to 0. So that small change made a difference. But this now costs money. So then we learned about affordability, and there's a difference between cost and affordability. Cost is where we thought we'd start. Let's make it low cost. But the social interactions are quite difficult because typically people will try by the lowest cost. So if they want lighting, say compact fluorescent tube, they will buy one that may last 3 or 4 months because it's cheapest. There are ones that will last 5 years, but there are it's a lot more expensive. The thing is, the ones that are 5 years long are actually cheaper per month if you can afford it. So then we brought in the concept of microfinance, which means you can take away the problem of capital payment, and then they pay so much per month. And that's why affordability, it can be made much more affordable, but just by changing slightly what you do. So in conclusion, the uptake depends very much on the social interactions. You have to understand the motivators, the inhibitors. You have to work with the community to get them to tell you what they want. Don't impose what you know. Yeah, there's another little story which I'll tell you in the bar later on if you're interested. That's quite interesting. But I think, yeah, thank you to the people that sponsor the project, EPSRC, my SCORE colleagues, and of course, thank you all for listening and for not falling asleep at this late hour.
Thank you, Paul.